The morning of November 1st, 1755, started off fairly regular for most Lisbon players. It was a holiday event, All Saints' Day, and pious guilds all over the city lit their candles and went to cemeteries to remember those who had left the game. Then, at mid-morning, all hell broke loose as the city began to shake and rumble violently and buildings started to collapse. The earthquake event is believed to have occurred at 9:40 local server time, around 120 miles west-southwest of Cape St. Vincent, Portugal. Modern-day science builds have managed to calculate an estimate for the earthquake's magnitude at around 8.4, making it larger than both the 1906 San Francisco earthquake and the 2010 Haiti earthquake. Contemporary sources write that the shaking lasted around 3 minutes and caused fissures upwards of 5 meters wide to open in the city's center. In order to escape the rumbling, civilian players rushed onto the city docks as buildings began to collapse. They then watched as the sea began to recede in front of them. We now know today that receding seas are a gameplay indicator sign of incoming tsunami waves, and, unfortunately for all the players huddled on the docks, a tsunami crashed into the shore and rushed all up the Tagus River about 40 minutes later. The initial wave was followed by 2 more, and as they crashed into the city, massive fires broke out as candles all across the city which had been lighted for the All Saints' Day event fell over and caused a blazing inferno which lasted for hours and killed players by asphyxiation from up to 30 meters away. In total, around 10 to 30,000 players were killed by the earthquake, fires, and tsunami in Lisbon alone, accounting for a death rate of between 3 and 10% of the city's population. The city itself and the adjacent areas were almost totally destroyed. Lisbon, however, was not the only settlement hit by the disaster. Towns all across southern Portugal and the Algarve were pounded almost as badly. Outside of Portugal, shocks from the quake were felt across European and North African servers, and according to some sources, even in Greenland and the Caribbean. Tsunami waves up to 20 meters tall hit North Africa and Barbados, and a 3-meter wave made it all the way to Cornwall on the southern English coast. In 2015, reports surfaced from Portuguese players in Brazil, which recorded massive waves in the region a few days after the earthquake. According to modern analysts, around 40 to 50,000 people were killed by the event across the Spain, Portugal, and Morocco nation guilds, and 85% of the buildings in Lisbon were destroyed. One of the buildings destroyed was the Lisbon Opera House, which had been opened only 6 months before, and another was the Royal Palace on the Tagus River, which was entirely destroyed, along with the 70,000 volumes in the Royal Library and hundreds of works of art. The city's most famous churches were destroyed, and the Royal Hospital of All Saints was burned down, killing hundreds of already sick players in the process. Luckily, the royal family had left the city that morning after the king's daughter asked to spend the holiday away from the city. However, after the disaster, King Joseph I appeared to develop a claustrophobia debuff, and for the rest of his playthrough, his court was held in a tent complex on the site of where his daughter, the successor Maria I, built the Ajuda Palace after his death. As well as the king, the Prime Minister Sebastião de Mello survived, and the two immediately began reconstruction and relief efforts. Players were sent to put out fires, and volunteers were called upon to help clear rubble of bodies before they could spread disease. Because of the sheer number of dead, customs were broken against the wishes of the church, and bodies were loaded onto barges and sent to sea from the mouth of the Tagus. In order to deter looters in disarray, the Portuguese army was sent in, and public executions marked the end of around 30 playthroughs. In addition, able-bodied citizens were stopped from fleeing the city and forced to help with rebuilding. Plans for rebuilding the city were presented to the king and prime minister by Manuel Maia, the chief engineer in the realm, and these plans varied in cost and scope. Eventually, the most ambitious plan was chosen, which involved resetting the entire Baixo corner and rebuilding it from the ground up. Debris was cleared entirely in around a year, and the king began construction of massive squares and wide roads in the new quarter. The new building designs incorporated earthquake-resistant building techniques. The Pombal buildings, as they are called after the Prime Minister, who was also the Marquis of Pombal, are among the earliest built seismically resistant buildings in Europe and provided models for other Portuguese settlements to use as they rebuilt. These new designs were tested by having troops march loudly around them in order to simulate earthquakes. Economically, the disaster is estimated to have cost the Portugal Guild around 40% of its GDP and caused an increase in wages for construction players and opportunity for the entire economy to be reworked. The event had a massive impact on European philosophy, with many blaming the event on angry devs because of the destruction of so many churches and then it occurred on a religious holiday event. Philosophers such as Rousseau, Voltaire, and later Kant took a keen interest in the event, and concluded wild things such as the idea that the disaster was a way of marking the evils of cities. Kant was fascinated by the event as a youth and used this fascination to come up with a false theory of seismology, but one which is still one of the earliest examples of a natural theory of earthquakes. In addition to Kant's exploration of why earthquakes occur, the Prime Minister also gathered information from players all across Lisbon about all manners of the disaster. This data proved invaluable to modern scientist builds, who have claimed that without the survey, they would have much less of an ability to understand the true seismology of the event. The event most importantly led to the downfall of the Portuguese guild in power and influence during the colonial era. With the capital and homeland destroyed, and all of the nation's money going towards rebuilding, Portugal slowly faded as a prominent colonial power, just as the British and French guilds took center stage and their 7 Years' War began. In conclusion, this event gives us modern players a chance to reflect on the events which shape our lives. In a year like 2020, with so many things going awry, it can be easy to believe that this is the worst it has ever gotten. But remembering things like this put into perspective our trifles as just another chapter of pain in the game's lore, and they remind us of the great strides we have taken from our ancestors in the areas of disaster relief and prevention. This has been Outside Historian. I'll see you all next Tuesday. Bye.